Okay, guys, so watch and listen carefully here. Our first one, we've got beryllium sulfide, which is an ionic compound, reacting with bromine, which is an element, a non-metal element. Okay, what kind of reaction is that going to be? Okay, in single replacement. They didn't have to write that. Okay, what they got to be able to do here is predict the product. So since it's a single replacement reaction, what's alone replaces what's in the ionic compound that is like itself. In this case, bromine and sulfur switch. Or sorry, bromine and sulfur switch. So beryllium ends up with bromine, and sulfur ends up by itself. All right, I'll give them 1 mark if they got that far. Okay, so they paired things up correctly. They'll get 1 mark. What have I not done yet? I haven't dropped and swapped, looked for specials, or balanced. Okay, so next mark. This is a -1, this is a +2, so we got BeBr2, and is sulfur special? Second mark, they have it look like that. Okay, third mark for balancing. All right, so we've got 8 sulfur over here, so I got to go back over here and make 8 sulfur. That gives me 8 beryllium, so I need an 8 here, which gives me 16 bromines, so an 8 here will fix that problem. So 8, 8, 8, 1 for balancing. All right, if they had it blank, that's fine on this one because it wasn't fill in the blank. Okay, 3 marks, questions? All right. Second one, I've got nitrogen and it's reacting with potassium, 2 elements. What kind of reaction is that? Synthesis. Okay, what kind of compound are you going to make? Did I tell you I would do that? Remember the trick I told you I was going to play on you? I warned you. I warned you. Right? You got to write it as an ionic compound. Metal first, non-metal second. So if they have K and N together in any order, 1. Okay? If they have it like this, another 1. Okay? And we got a balance. So we've got 2 nitrogens over here. So I'm going to put a 2 there that balances my nitrogens, which gives me 6 potassiums. 1 mark for that. Be ever vigilant. I only have so many tricks, and I use them as often as I think they will work, like possibly next week on a unit exam. Okay, number 3, I've got copper 2 sulfate reacting with sodium hydroxide, double replacement reaction. We switch the metals. All right, so copper's new partner is hydroxide, sodium's new partner is sulfate. Okay, 1 mark if they have them paired up correctly. Then we got a drop and swap. What was copper's charge over here? 2, so it has to be 2 over here, which means we need brackets around the OH for our drop and swap with a 2 outside. And sulfate is a -2, but sodium is a +1, so we need Na2SO4, 1 mark if they have them correctly dropped and swapped. And then we have to balance. That'll take care of that. Daniel, question? If they what? Then it doesn't. Then it's not right. Okay. Other questions on number 3? Okay. It's got to have. This one's got to have the brackets, and this one's got to not have the brackets. Okay. That's the way those work. Okay. Number 4. I've got this stuff is, what is it? Butane. Something like that. Anyway, okay, we got a carbon hydrogen containing compound, otherwise known as a hydrocarbon, reacting with oxygen. Okay, what kind of reaction is that? Combustion. So we know the products are CO2 and water. They can have 2 marks for that. Okay, we got a balance. That'll be our 3rd mark. Do I need both special balancing rules for this one? Yes, because 4 is an even number. Okay, 2 times 4 is 8. So I need an 8 there. 2 times 10 is 20. 10 times 2 is 20. I got 10 oxygens in the water, 16 more here for a total of 26. 13 times 2 is 26. Questions on number 4? Okay, for number 5, I've got manganese 4 chloride, which is an ionic compound, and it's all by itself. So what kind of reaction is that? decomposition. So it's going to break down into manganese and chlorine. 1 mark. Second mark. Okay, chlorine is special. All right. Third mark for balancing. Okay, it's out of 15. So give him a mark out of 15. Let him see it. Put it in the box. All right, so on your assignment here, okay, and I'll come up with a due date here in just a little bit. It's really important that you pay attention to the instructions for each set of 10 questions. You'll notice that that assignment is divided up into 3 sections of 10. Okay, each section of 10 is asking you to do something different, and inevitably, where people lose marks on this, and they lose them big, is doing the wrong thing for each section of 10. All right, and that's not good. So we want you to follow the instructions very, very carefully. All right, for the first 10 questions, all you are going to do is balance them and write them in words. Okay, that's all you're doing for the first 10. Balance them and write them out in words underneath. All right, that's why you've been given the room underneath to write them. All right, things to watch for. Roman numerals. People forget those on their multivalent metals. Okay, changing the names of things, like especially misnaming molecular compounds. Okay, I see that happen an awful lot too. But the Roman numeral thing is probably the biggest thing that people lose marks on, other than not following the instructions correctly. Okay, at least on the first 10, forgetting the Roman numerals. All right, so the mark breakdown is this. You'll get 1 for balancing, 1 mark for your reactants, the names of them, that is, and 1 mark for the products. Okay. The reason I keep bringing up the Roman numeral thing is, usually if people forget it on one side of the equation, they also forget it on the other side of the equation, and as a result, they lose 2 marks for the same mistake. So you don't want to be in that boat. Okay? Everyone follow me there? All right. Okay, so that's what's expected for the first 10. Tips on a couple that can be tricky. Okay, for example, number 4 can be a little tricky with balancing because nitrate breaks up in this complex decomposition type reaction. Okay, and so we see that the oxygens that were here in nitrate end up in every single compound on the product side. Remember that you need them to balance in total. All of the ones on the products need to equal all of the ones on the reactant side. What usually comes up in a situation like this is the same thing that came up in our combustion reactions, and that is that we have an odd number of oxygens on one side and an even number on the other. What's the quickest way to turn an odd number into an even number? Multiply by 2. I would suggest that if you run into that problem, it is good to start the reaction with a 2. Follow the rule of 2 from combustion reactions. That's why it's there. Okay? It just doesn't always apply in other types of reactions. But when you see that problem happens, usually it's with oxygen, but sometimes it's with something else. You can try doubling the first thing in the reaction. Usually that takes care of the problem. Okay? All right, so that could apply to like 4 and 6 and 7. Okay? They're kind of complex balancing type reactions. Okay? Questions on those? Everyone's good with those? Okay. The second set of 10 questions. You need to identify the type of reaction that is occurring. Okay? That's 1 mark. And man, that's the easiest mark. And man, I can't tell you how many times people don't do it. There's 10 questions in that section. If you forget to do it on all of them, how many marks did you give up? 10 out of 90. That's like, what, 11 point something percent. Yeah, don't do that. Okay? That's the easiest 11% you could ever get, is identifying the reaction types. Remember to do it. Okay? Your next thing will be, your next mark will be for writing the reaction in formula form. Okay? So, shorthand for reaction, by the way, is RXN. Okay? So 1 mark. Okay? So getting all the formulas right, reactants and products, 1 mark. Make 1 mistake, that mark's gone. Okay? and 1 mark for balancing. Here's the real kick in the pants. If you don't get the formulas right, will you get the balancing right? Okay, so make sure you do the easy part the right way. Okay, do your swaps and drops, do your, use your prefixes, that kind of thing. And most importantly, if there's something that screws people over on that set of 10 questions, it is forgetting their special elements. Because if you don't get those right, you don't get the mark for the reaction, and you won't get the balancing right either. Okay, so please make sure you remember to check for special elements. Okay, questions on that set of 10? Okay, the last set of 10 questions is exactly what we did in the quiz this morning. Okay, you will get 2 marks for the products. Okay, essentially 1 mark for having them paired correctly and 1 mark for having them with the right numbers. Okay, and then 1 mark for balancing. Okay, you'll notice there's very little room in between these questions. That's because you don't have to write them in words. Okay, just like the questions we did on the quiz this morning, all you have to do is predict the products and balance the reaction. Okay? Questions on any of that? Okay, you have 50 minutes of class time. Okay? And 30 questions. I would bet some of you will get close to done. Okay? And the rest of you will be also, like, I would say 3/4 of the way. All right? If you stay focused on this, you should have very little of it to do later for homework. All right? But how well you work is entirely up to you. I'm all for not having so much homework. The question was, yesterday we talked about how if you don't have any way to figure out which charge a multivalent metal has, that you take the most common one. But in reactions like these, you have the reactants and the products. And I've already dropped and swapped all of the ionic compounds. So you can figure out which charge it is without having to go with the most common one. The only time you're going to have to do that is in a prediction type question, okay, where you may not be given the opportunity to figure it out. Yeah? Yeah, these are all dropped and swapped. Yeah. Okay. When naming compounds like in number 5, okay, look at what kind of compound that is. It's got 2 nonmetals in it, right? Okay, hydrogen is not listed first, therefore it behaves as a nonmetal. So name it as a molecular compound. Okay, use the proper molecular naming rules. I made sure the numbers were small enough that you would be able to do the prefixes. Okay. Okay, due date for this guy's going to be October 8th. I was thinking I might make it due before your exam so I could get it back to you, but you've got your toxin project, reactions lab report, and exam to study for, so it's too much. All right, so it's going to be due after the exam. Okay, October the 8th.